Welcome to Pleasure Doing Business with You, a podcast showcasing young Black entrepreneurs who have paved their own ways to success. I'm your host, Megan Sayles, business writer at Afro News and Report for America Core member. Today we are talking to Jinji Fraser, who founded Pure Chocolate by Jinji in 2012 with her father, Guy. The duo sell their ethically sourced chocolate products at their retail shop in Baltimore, as well as online. Hello, Jinji. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thank you.
Of course. So before we get started with some of the questions I have prepared for you, could you just introduce yourself to our listeners?
Sure. My name is Jinji, and I'm a chocolate maker in Baltimore City in Maryland. Been doing this for going on 10 years. It's hard to believe it's been that long, but
Yeah.
going on 10 years. I'm from Baltimore. This is home for me. Um, I got my undergrad out in Indiana at Indiana University, but came right back home and I've been here ever since.
So Charm City, Charm
Yeah,
City. So like your home. I gotcha.
yeah.
So, when did you kind of get interested in making chocolate and when did you start like experimenting with making your own chocolate?
Well, I don't know, wasn't as intentional as the question makes it sound like it might have been. I was in corporate America for a while, and then I was working in nutrition, working with clients, helping them as they were transitioning from refined foods to more holistic ones. And something that would come up pretty often is needing something sweet and just actually, I guess specifically wanting chocolate as a way to like bridge that gap. So that's when I started. I guess you could say, experimenting with recipes and getting into it. But then I had a very serendipitous moment of stumbling upon a chocolate making class and had no idea where that would lead me. Just thought that it would be a good skill set to have. And the rest was history. We started the business about 3 months after that.
Okay. And you started it with your father, correct?
Yes, my dad and I started it together.
How is it working with your father, like running the business with your dad?
It's been great. I mean, we both do very different things. So that's been really good just because, his strengths are definitely my weakness. He does all of the finances and payroll and all that kind of thing. So if I would have been in charge of all of that, I'm not sure we'd be even having this conversation. So, um, that's been a very, very good thing. And then it's just, it's great to have a family business, and
Mhm.
he and I are the main people, but my whole family is involved in some way, shape, or form.
Gotcha.
So it's been a great little journey for sure.
Yeah, it takes a village to kind of run a business, I feel like.
That's right, for sure. Yeah.
And so, you had that chocolate making class and you enjoyed it, obviously. Why did you want to, just open your own chocolate company?
That's another thing that I wasn't really planning on doing. It was one of those things where um, when I was experimenting and when I was doing different recipes, one person liked it, then two, then four, then eight, then 16. And it was like, oh, well, I guess I could also charge for this. And oh, I guess we could make a little bit more of this or a little bit more of that. And that's really when my dad came on board. Um, was when it was becoming more of a serious consideration. But even then, I mean, no one in my family had ever owned a business before. I definitely didn't have, these high ambitions or
Hmm.
this aspiration to own my own business or anything like that. So it came about very organically, not forced at all. And it just, yeah, it was a very like abstract idea of something
Hmm.
that we could possibly do. without a lot of framework to it, which for better or for worse, I mean, that's how we started.
Hmm.
So,
And it seems like it's worked out along the way.
so far, so good.
And so when you in making the chocolate, where are you sourcing your ingredients from? And can you talk a little bit about especially kind of ethically sourcing the ingredients when it comes to making chocolate?
Sure. I mean, it's the most important thing that we do, and the most difficult thing that we do also. You know, in the beginning it was just um, we found a farming collective that we believed in, and we wanted to work with. We only knew that we wanted it to be, ethical, and we wanted to pay a fair amount, and we wanted to know that our farmers were treated well. Like, we had all of our
Hmm.
bullet points that we wanted to hit, and we did. For years we used the same source, which was out of Ecuador.
Hmm.
And then along the way I started doing a lot more travel, started having a lot more conversations just about what the future of chocolate could look like, and how
Hmm.
to impact kind of the flow of history in the making, you know.
Hmm.
And that's when we decided that we wanted to switch up our sourcing. We wanted to work with family-owned farms or women-owned farms, just to kind of work towards healing that disparity. And so now we source our beans from Trinidad, a
Okay.
family farm that's there, and the lead farmer there is a woman that's not much older than I am, and it's a great little relationship.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
And I feel like kind of looking at the chocolate or the cocoa industry as a whole, it seems to be a white male dominated space. What do you think, kind of needs to be done to address this? And do you feel that you've faced any challenges because of it?
Well, to address it, it's a long game. It's a
Hmm.
really long game, because we're talking about an industry that came out of colonialism, and
Hmm.
still is very much ingrained in colonialist points of view and ideals, and it's really hard to break through that in any industry, and this one is included.
Hmm.
Uh, it's expensive to have a chocolate company, and it's difficult to be a farmer and get what you need to sustain your farm. So those are two things that need to come together in order for the industry to move forward in a more holistic way and in a more inclusive way. Um, there, when I started, there weren't any, to my what I so for what I knew, there weren't any other black craft chocolate makers, and particularly no black women
Wow.
craft chocolate makers. So it was a lonely space to be in.
Hmm.
um, how it affected me, that's kind of how racism works. That's kind of how systemic racism works, is that you're just in the system. So regardless of if you're having these like overt challenges or these very direct and difficult moments, that's one thing. But you're in the system, which we've already said is very white male dominated. So
Hmm.
it just is what it is at that point.
Yeah.
um, one of the things that I think could change as it is getting a little bit more diverse year over year is, perhaps there's some sort of a collective in this country of um, people of color who are making chocolate, and I think that consumers would be interested to know, and maybe there's some kind of um, certification or seal, just so that people know that there's an ancestral line that whatever bar is coming from. Um, because that's the other part of it, is that many times there's, for people of color, that's where cacao originates, is in our familial homelands, wherever that
Hmm.
is. So if there's a way to honor that and there's a way to highlight that and a way to educate the community about it, I think that we should.
Yeah,
Um, and we do it in our own way, and everyone can do it in their own way as they feel comfortable or as they see fit. But um, I think that a lot of Americans, in particular, aren't really very knowledgeable about where chocolate comes from and how it begins and what all goes into it before it even, hits a shelf.
yeah,
So starting there, educating throughout, and forming um, a collective just group that can teach people where we're from and how we make our chocolate.
exactly. Yeah.
Um, yeah, could be a big thing.
Yeah. It sounds like it would be a big thing. It sounds like something that is important for the future.
Hmm.
Um, and so can you tell me a little bit about how like what the chocolate making process entails when when you get your ingredients? Like how long does it take and what goes into it?
Yeah, that's another thing that people are very naive about. I mean,
Yeah.
particularly this week of Halloween, we're reminded of it, right? You
Hmm.
have people just equate chocolate with candy, and it must just take, like a couple hours to pull together, and
Yeah.
that's that. Well, with what we do and this other level of chocolate, it's more than a 48-hour process.
Wow.
You get your beans in, and then, and not to mention that before you get your beans in, it's already been a 2-week processing period of drying and
Hmm.
fermentation, and then before that, a several year process of growing the beans. So there's that.
Yeah.
um, and then once I get them, then they need to be roasted, similar to how you would do with coffee beans. So we roast our beans, and then the hull of the bean needs to be separated from the inside of the bean, or the nibs. So there's a machine that's called a winnower. We would crack them first and then winnow them to separate those two parts. And then with the nibs, we can create like a paste. Um, and then with that paste, we can combine it with other flavorings or sugar or whatever we want to do. And that mixes together for at least a day, sometimes up to 3 days, depending on the
Wow.
flavor that we're trying to achieve and the
Hmm.
consistency that we're trying to achieve. So at that point, the chocolate is made, and then you can then decide, is it going to become a bar? Then you go through a process called tempering.
Hmm.
Is it going to be a drink? Then you can go straight from that point and make some delicious drink, which is
Hmm.
where chocolate started also, many, 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 many years ago. So, yeah, so it depends on what you're going to do with it, but it is a multi day, very laborious
Yeah.
hero's journey.
It sounds like a long process. And it's crazy to think that you're right. I think people are so naive. It's just you go pick up a chocolate bar from the grocery store, you don't think about
Yeah,
what went into creating that. And
yeah,
it's nice to hear about the fact that it is a kind of a tedious process.
yeah.
And so can you tell us a little bit about what are some of the products that you're currently selling and what is your favorite of all of them?
Um, so we are right now selling a bunch of things. So we have um kind of more novelty chocolates this time of year, just going
Hmm.
into holiday and all of that. So we have truffles and fudge, we have pralines and pot de creme, and um, something called a date popper, which is a medjool date that's filled with cacao nibs and honey and a little bit of salt and then dipped in our dark chocolate. Um, we have our peanut butter filled figs, which is
Mm.
always a big hit this time of year too. It's a Turkish fig with a peanut butter ganache and then dipped in dark chocolate. Um, so yeah, we have a few things, and we have chocolate covered coffee beans and a syrup that you can use for either topping desserts or for your own make at home chocolate drinks.
Hmm.
Um, And we are slowly but surely introducing a full line of drinking chocolates. So that's what's most exciting for me because that feels very ancestrally aligned and
Hmm.
um, very just authentic to who we are and what we're trying to become as a business.
And what do you think like makes your chocolate stand out from like competitors?
Um, I think that, anyone that makes chocolate knows that it's a very energetic process and that chocolate itself, cacao itself, really picks up on the energy of its maker.
Hmm.
Um, so we always keep that in mind. And whenever we meet customers or people who've had our chocolate, some of the first things that they just say is that it's a really great experience and that they haven't had chocolate like ours before. And
Hmm.
um, I don't know, I like to think that everyone who makes it puts their own mark on it
Hmm.
and their own touch and their own energy to it, and people can just pick up on that. So I don't know, we're happy people and doing our thing.
Gotcha. And kind of, I guess, speaking to that, like having a different touch on it when you're making chocolate. I saw that like every chocolate that you guys are making, it tells a story. Can you talk a little bit about what that means?
Yep. So I guess in the beginning, and this is a ritual and a practice that we've continued since then, um, we just had this idea that in order to create a flavor, it should have a story behind it. So that could be a story of nostalgia, it could be a story of current events, it could be anything in the world, whatever we're feeling, whatever we've tasted or touched that we want to then translate into a chocolate flavor, we do that and we take note of the story that it took us through to get to that point. Um, so, for the most recent one that we did was called Five Deaf Ears, and um, that was a reflection of the Supreme Court decision not to get involved with the Texas abortion ban situation. Um, so we create then a flavor that that mirrors how we feel about that, and then we tell our customers about it, and it becomes a community story, which I think
Mhm.
is great.
Yeah, I have to say I really like that idea, like going on your website and reading the different stories because
Mhm.
I feel like sometimes when I am eating something, I associate it with like a memory, like it make like
Sure,
especially in that like nostalgia aspect of like this reminds me of like my childhood or something. So I think
sure.
that's so great to like have a story with every product that you're making.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a fun part for sure. That's the other thing is it just keeps it fresh and for myself and for everyone that we're working together that I work with, it just keeps it new and keeps it fun, and we can talk together and we can play it with ideas and learn about one another in that way, and it makes the team stronger, makes the chocolate better, I think, and is a big part of who we are.
Definitely. And can you tell listeners how they can buy your chocolate?
Yep, just online, or we have our brick and mortar here in Baltimore if you're a local person. But we have our website too, gingychocolate.com.
Yeah. And, you know, starting a business obviously comes with its challenges. So, what is one piece of advice you'd offer to an aspiring entrepreneur?
Um, well, the best advice that I got in the beginning is
Mhm.
what I like to pass on, and it doesn't seem like too groundbreaking or anything like that.
Mhm.
Often the simplest words are the best advice, right?
Mhm.
Um, but for me, it was be careful who you tie your sales to. And I remember hearing that in the beginning and just being like, Okay. I don't know, but over the years, different opportunities come and different opportunities go. You say yes to things, you say no to things. And what's always in the back of my mind is, who do you want to be connected with? I
Yeah.
mean, we're not meant to do this alone. None of us are.
Hmm.
And if we're to move through this together, who do you want the closest to you?
Yeah.
Who's going to inspire you? Who do you want to inspire? Um, and, after all is said and done, you're going to want to leave the door open for somebody to come back through. So,
Yeah.
keeping
Exactly.
all of that in mind.
Gotcha. And so at the end of each of the podcast interviews, I kind of like to just switch things up a little bit and stop talking shop. And I like to ask like a little random question. And for this week, I want to know, if you were to play a song right now, what would it be?
If I were to play a song right now, well, I have I can't believe that he's this old, but he's going to be a year. I have a son who's going to be a year on Friday.
Oh, amazing.
And yeah, in one sense it's like I can't believe he's not 3 months anymore, but then I also can't believe that he's not like driving yet too.
Yeah.
But he just started daycare and I miss him, so I would play Always Be My Baby by Mariah.
That's amazing. That's a really good answer. Well, thank you so much for your time today and for being on the podcast. It was a pleasure doing business with you.
Thank you, Megan. Have a great day.
Thanks.